you and I were there, we were proud of constantly being on the cutting edge. We were proud of constantly coming up with something new. In fact, we took it for granted that music was all about carving new territory.
Well,
that isn't taken for granted anymore, and kids need to put their brains on the case of where we are going next. And let me tell you one other story. Last week I was in Washington, and I went down there for a meeting of the 14 research and direction, that is R&D heads, of the Department of Energy's 14 research labs. And I couldn't miss this meeting, Ian, despite the fact that my editor wants me to work on my next book. And I was impressed by a bunch of things, but one of them was every single one of these people at the beginning of his or her talk mentioned off-the-shelf software or on-the-shelf software that had already been developed but hadn't been turned into new products or new services. And every single one of them bypassed it in just 3 words, and then it was gone. They never talked about it again. Well, Steve Jobs, we talked about the miracle of Steve Jobs and what he represents to the future of America, how he's a model of what things should be for the future of America. Steve Jobs latched onto a technology that was already almost old 40 years ago, when he was a kid. It was the technology developed at Xerox PART. The research and development of the technology had already been done. The American creativity factor was already there. Where was America missing something? Not in the creativity factor, but in delivering the creative product in a form that you could put in your hand, like the iPad or like the iPhone. It has taken Steve Jobs 40 years of taking technology from the shelf and giving it to you and me to get to the point of the iPad and the iPhone. And it's time for us now to look at the technologies that are on the shelf, all the things that we've invented and never used, and start turning them into products before it's too late. That's where our hope lies. That's where our future lies.
And I would say that they're all of those things we talked about in the last 10 minutes, they're all connected, because I think it comes down to this. You have to have confidence in the fact that there is an economy that's worth investing your time in. You have to have confidence that there is a currency that is going to be there for you, that if you put all your efforts into building something, that there's going to be a payoff down the road, that when your products come to market, people are going to have money to actually buy them. There's going to be a government there, an infrastructure to support their distribution. You want to have confidence that we're not going to go to war at any second and get decimated with ICBMs.
Right.
All of these things are all tied together. You want to have confidence when you get on a plane that it's going to be a secure environment. You can relax and fly. All these things are all tied together. It's all perception. In a way, it's perception over reality. And I think that's the same problem that's going on right now, that's being underestimated about the response to the security at our airports, is that there's what you're hearing is a response from people that say, I don't believe it. I absolutely do not believe that this is making us safer. Now, some people do, 30%, 40%, whatever. But when you have a TSA agent putting his hands on somebody's breasts in order to make sure that the wires that are in the bra or her mastectomy, the prosthetic that's there after her mastectomy is not a gel bomb. I mean, these things are just they're so far spinning out of control in the wrong direction that, right or wrong, the perception doesn't allow the security to ever flourish.
Right. There is a perceptual blunder that has taken place here, and it's apparently pretty large. It's not large enough to have stopped the lines at the airports on the day before Thanksgiving, but it is a big one. And you're right. Just think for a minute. In India, the Osama-like attacks, by that I mean attacks where 10 bombs go off at once.
Right.
They've focused on transport, but they haven't focused on airplanes. They have focused on railroad trains. In Spain, when 10 bombs went off at once, they did not focus. They focused on transport, but they did not focus on airplanes. They focused on trains. And in Britain, when they had their terrorist attack in London, again, it focused on underground transportation and bus transportation, but not planes. So you have a good argument when you say that we're trying to address the Christmas bomber of last year who was carrying explosively loaded underpants, instead of looking at the bigger picture. And you're also right in saying that sometimes the government is showing that it doesn't know how to play the piano of human emotions. And it's definitely played the scales wrong. But the big thing is this. You and I are people who get to influence the opinions to the best of our ability of lots of other people because we believe very powerfully in things, and we spend all of our time masticating information on behalf of other people. And what we really need to do is make sure that small things like this do not get in the way of the big things. And the big things are, what are we creating for the future?
All right, let me give you a proposal that that Steve Jobs is the Cyrus McCormick of our generation.
Neat. Wonderful. I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, okay, so tonight we did my Thanksgiving dinner. Tonight I was with my family. What did I find out about my family tonight that I didn't know? Well, I already knew that one of my cousins had been head of research and development for Ross Wyatt Labs, and then had developed something that Ross Wyatt Labs wasn't interested in taking any further, so he bought it from them and started his own drug company. Then tonight, cool. That I already knew. Well,
that's cool.
And that's a ballsy thing to do, especially in a time of total economic devastation.
I agree.
And then I discovered that his two sons, who are in their 20s, are not only both within his company right now, picking up where he left off, gaining all of his knowledge and adding theirs, but one of them has made a website for him, but the two of them are starting their own companies within his company. In other words, they're building on the experience of their dad. Well, one of the things we missed back in the 1960s when we were all trying to rebel against our parents and get away from our families, that was a necessary phase for American culture to go through. But in the process, we ditched our parents' knowledge. And to see the importance of multi-generational knowledge coming to life in an innovative context, in the context of people putting together entrepreneurial ventures, and my cousin assured me that he'd met people from all over the country who were doing the same thing with their kids. This has a power, and it's bolstered by the fact that you don't need a big office anymore. Your office is wherever you have your laptop and your cell phone. So kids can do things with their parents and get into business with them and still do business all over the world wherever they can open their laptop and wherever they can open their cell phone. It's a radically new world out there.
And one that calls us to participate in its future instead of being and I believe you're right in saying this, that the gold is in the optimism that the next great product is still out there, that our best days aren't behind us, that as soon as we start to think like that, then we are doomed to that eventuality.
No, I agree with you totally. And the retro thing in American culture, the fact that American theater, another one of my cousins, has started, he started something impossible, a theater company in town that he felt was bereft of culture. He started it about 35 years ago. Now it's one of the leading avant-garde theater companies in the world. It's called the Woolly Mammoth Theater. And it was impossible. Ian, it was impossible. And right now he's teaching other people all around the world how to start their own theater companies. So this is the kind of small scale, taking your dreams in your hand and saying, I'm going to turn these into a reality, looking at the technologies that are on the shelf but nobody is using to see how they fit with your realities and making new things happen. You are absolutely right. The real gold is in our perceptions and our imaginations and our confidence.
Okay, so and by the way, if I remember correctly, Buffalo, New York, where Howard Bloom finds himself tonight, is the city where a lot of very famous inventions originated, like the grain elevator. The first grain elevator was in Buffalo, New York, and not to mention buffalo wings, which I'm very fond of too.
Also, there's another little aspect of Buffalo culture that people don't know. There was a kid who grew up in the Midwest, teaching himself with law books, teaching himself at night by the fireplace because his family was poor. And his culture hero was a guy named Grover Clinton, who was the governor of New York State. And Grover Clinton was his hero because Grover Clinton had been responsible for a radical technology innovation. It was digging a canal from the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes. It was called the Erie Canal. And this kid in Illinois wanted to be like Grover Clinton. So his dream was to take this new thing called the railroad, which was only local at that point, and to link up a railroad from the West Coast, which at that point was supposed to be desolate and useless and empty space that could never be of value to a human being, and to use the railroad system to link up the West Coast to the East Coast. And that kid was a railroad lawyer named Abraham Lincoln. So the Erie Canal was what got Abraham Lincoln's imagination churning, and that's why in The Genius of the Beast it talks about an infrastructure of fantasy.
Yep.
The infrastructure of fantasy is desperately important, especially to a culture like ours that could be on the leg of its first major rebirth.
Well, and that's what we need to do if we're going to have a future. Everybody needs to reinvent themselves from time to time. You're certainly living testimony to that. Howard Bloom, thank you as always. A pleasure. The Genius of the Beast makes a great Christmas present, holiday gift. Thank you, Howard. Look forward to seeing you next time in New York.
Thanks, Ian. I'll see you in New York.